Welcome to Secrets from the Scene, a show for local musicians who want to improve their music, grow their audience, and learn about Minnesota's music scene. If you're interested in talking about all things music related and meeting interesting people from our local community, you're in the right place. Welcome to Secrets from the Scene. My name is Steven Helvig, and I'm your host. Today's episode 41, I've got guest Kevin Bowe, and I'm really excited to have him here today. We're meeting for the first time, which is awesome. You know, doing just even a tiny bit of research on Kevin is very impressive. He's had a long, successful career here in the scene, but also nationally. His list of collaborations and achievements is long. We'll get into those shortly, but today's episode, we're going to talk about myths and misunderstandings in the music business, which there are plenty of. We chatted a little bit just on the phone before this episode, and it became clear that we could talk for a year on this. And I thought it'd be kind of a fun way to get to know each other a little bit, but also share some really helpful insights from a veteran like you on the things that you've learned over the time. But I want to read your bio quick so people get, if anybody that doesn't know you, can get a sense of a little bit of your history before we dive into that. So I'll read that quick here. Kevin Bowe is a writer, producer, mixer, musician from Minneapolis. He has written songs on 3 platinum records and 2 Grammy-winning albums, working with Johnny Lang, The Replacements, Etta James, Joe Cocker, Paul Westerberg, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Three Dog Night, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Little Steven Van Zandt, Communist Daughter, and many other artists. His songs have been performed by Lucinda and Bruce Springsteen. Operating out of the Kill Room, his Minneapolis studio, Kevin produces many artists and bands, indie rock, pop, roots, singer-songwriter, and sync music. He was the first writer in over 20 years to be signed by legends Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, and collaborates with many other writers and producers. Kevin's music has been placed in dozens of films and TV shows, including The Sopranos, Shameless, Ray Donovan, and The Blacklist. Although currently focused on the studio, Kevin has played guitar on tours with Paul Westerberg, Gary Loris, and Freedy Johnston, along with fronting his own band, the Okama Prophets. Please welcome Kevin Bowe.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I was going to ask you before I read that, did I say that right, Okama?
No, but you said it the way most people say it.
How is it supposed to be said?
It's Okima, actually.
Okima.
It's the birthplace. It's a town in Oklahoma. It's the birthplace of Woody Guthrie.
Yeah, I read the history of it. I just had no idea how the actual pronunciation worked.
It's a cool place, actually. I played a festival they have there, the Woody Guthrie Free Folk Festival. I played it a couple of times, and it's unlike anything in Minnesota, that's for sure. You can just feel the Dust Bowl there. It's really cool.
Interesting. Well, I mean, this bio is very impressive.
Well, like I said, I left out the bad stuff.
Take people through a little bit of your journey to today. I mean, obviously there's a lot to cover, so you don't have to get into the weeds on everything, but maybe just some of the big highlights of how this all came together.
Well, there's a lot of weeds, so yeah, let's stay out of the weeds. I guess if I put it in a nutshell, I'd say in the 60s, I was a little kid. In the 70s, I was a guitar player in high school rock bands and a dope fiend and drug addict and drug dealer wearing bell-bottoms and Led Zeppelin t-shirts. I've always been a late bloomer. By the way, that stuff was actually cool then. And then in the 80s, after high school, I moved out of the western suburbs and lived downtown where I've lived ever since. The 80s were a really interesting time magical time in Minneapolis because you had on one hand the two, at the time, the most important punk rock, for lack of a better word, bands in the world were from here, The Replacements and Husker Du. And then on the other side of the music scene here, you had Prince changing the world with his music, culminating in Purple Rain in 1984-85. And so it was an amazing time to be in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I mean, people were actually moving to Minneapolis from all over the world because they see the movie Purple Rain and they thought it was a documentary or that it was true. And, I remember going to First Avenue on a night when Prince would be playing in the main room for $3 and you could cross over into the entry and see the Replacements. I mean, and I was young and stupid and I didn't realize that. I mean, I valued it, but I don't think there's any way to fully get that, wow, I'm in the right place at the right time.
How could you until you look back?
Yeah, until you look back. Yeah, exactly. But it was amazing and I just learned so much from watching those people. But again, I'm a slow learner, so I wasn't overly burdened with success in the 80s. I started singing and writing. I mean, I originally just wanted to be a guitar player in a band, but I was in this punk band in the very early 80s. We were terrible, just terrible, but we were funny. So some people liked us. And one of our more popular songs was called I Don't Want to Join the Army, written by the lead singer. And then he quit the band to join the Army. So I was like, well, I don't really feel like singing, but I want to sing because I don't want this to happen to me again. And then if you want to sing, well, what am I going to sing? I guess I better learn to write songs. So it wasn't some big romantic ambition. It was just more utilitarian. So I started fronting my own bands. And then I think I had a lucky break because in 87, there was this new nightclub that opened up called The Fine Line. And I got a gig there and met the owner, and we've been together ever since. My wife, Ruth, she owned The Fine Line with this other guy for 3 years or so. And then she sold out to her partner. And then Prince, when she first opened The Fine Line, Prince came to the opening party. And then a month later, he called her up and said, Ruth, it's Prince. I want to play your club Friday night. And her whole dream was, I just want to build a nightclub that's cool enough that Prince would play there. And within a month, it happened. I remember she let me into that show. There was a line down the block and stuff. It was one of those secret shows that everyone knew about. It was the Sheila E. Band. They were all in tux and tails, and they played a lot of Housequake and a lot of the stuff of that album. And they played some Duke Ellington. It was amazing. Anyway, so when she sold out of The Fine Line, then Prince brought her in to build nightclubs for him. She built a club called Glam Slam that was downtown for a while. And that was cool. I used to get a lot of opening gigs there that I didn't deserve. And one of those gigs, my band was playing. This is when you're like, you're over 30 and you're running into people you went to high school with. It's like, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer. And it's like, well, I'm in a band. We just made $100 opening for this other band that's really way better than us. And I don't mean $100 a piece. I mean $100. But there was a producer in the audience one night when my band was doing the opening set named David Z. And he was really on top of the world right then because he had just gotten the Grammy for Producer of the Year for doing that Fine Young Cannibals record, She Drives Me Crazy. And he had co-written Kiss with Prince and engineered Purple Rain. And I mean, he's just really an amazing guy. And he liked my band. So he met with me. And I remember him telling, and this is just how I remember it, maybe it wasn't this harsh, but he was like, you're not that good, and your band's even worse, but your songs are good, and if someone better than you was singing those songs, you could make some real money, kid. And I didn't even know what publishing was, because this is before internet, and so, people were much more ignorant about how the music business really works.
Yeah.
And so he had me for a visit. He was such a big deal then that he had an office at Paisley Park. They just gave him an office.
Wow.
And back then, Paisley, you could go buy time there. It wasn't just Prince's playground. It was, and I gave him a cassette of some of my songs, and he took one, and he went off to Memphis to produce the debut album by a very young guitar player named Kenny Wayne Shepherd. And they recorded one of my songs on the album, even had me play guitar on it. And I thought, I'm going to get to go to Memphis and play in the session. No, they shipped the 24-track tape up here, and I did it in some little studio in Minneapolis. But the record came out and went gold and eventually platinum. And that's when I realized that he was right, that I should be writing for other people. And then I had some lucky breaks after that where I was doing a gig with my band in Fargo. This is all early 90s.
Okay.
And I remember it was, my band was already to the We Hate Each Other place. And it was 20 below. And it was some sports bar where there's like sports on TV and, oh yeah, a band playing in the corner.
Uh-huh.
And we were on the bill with this 13-year-old kid. And I remember thinking, what's next? Well, it would be Animal Acts. My career is really in the doldrums, but it was kid Johnny Lang, and he was 13. He'd only been playing guitar for 9 months, but he got up to do sound check. And I mean, I just watching him, I'm no great talent scout, But anyone seeing that, people in Fargo already knew they were going crazy for him, but nobody from Minneapolis had seen him yet. We got to be friends, and he thought I was a big deal because I had written a song for Kenny Wayne Shepherd. And I remember looking at him and saying, Johnny, you're going to be way bigger than Kenny Wayne Shepherd. And I brought, I think it was a board tape, just a cassette back to Minneapolis. And we got to be friends and started writing songs together. And I gave that tape to David Z. And long story short, David ended up producing, and I wrote a bunch of songs for him. We got him signed to A&M Records and did 2 double platinum records. And on the second one, we were recording in Minneapolis at a studio that's not there anymore. It's a great place called CD Underbelly. And Steve Cropper from Booker T and the MGs was on guitar, and Richie Hayward from Little Feat was on drums, and all these great musicians, and I was terrified. But back then, the budgets were so big. It was a whole different world. We got together in the studio and got all the sounds happening. And then David's like, okay, let's listen to some songs and decide what to cut. I mean, there was no pre-production or anything. And they played one of my songs, and I was using like a 4-track cassette recorder at the time, like all of us, punk rockers did. But I had done some cool stuff with echoes, and it was a very lo-fi demo, but it had a thing, it had a vibe. And we listened to the song, and I remember Steve Cropper said, well, we can cut that, but we're never going to beat the demo. And I was like, wow. Because up till then, I thought all this stuff, I mean, we're sitting in a beautiful studio here, your studio right now. I looked at all those boxes and microphones, and I thought, well, that's just unicorn stuff. Those people are magicians. I would never be smart enough to do that. And that was the first time I had a thought that maybe I could like produce and engineer and stuff. And that's what planted the seed for that.
Sure. And this was early 90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe by then it was mid 90s. But so I started getting into the nerd stuff, and I really liked it. I wasn't very good at it, but I really liked it. And the timing was lucky because then when 2000 came and Napster emerged and kind of the music business began that shift in how people listen to music and don't pay for it, it got to be where it was way better to be a one-stop shop. Someone wants to make a recording, and you can do everything. You can help them write. You can, play on it. You can record it. You can mix it. You can edit it, and be able to do it all because the budgets were smaller. So people wanted one place. Also, it was way more fun. It's way more fun because then you can make the music. As a songwriter, someone's going to produce the song and they're going to do whatever. You don't have any say in that. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to influence, in the creation of stuff. So that led to, I started engineering and producing. But back then, I produced and I had an engineer for the first bunch of records I did, Dick Shopto. And he kind of taught me how to engineer, along with Steve Hodge and some other local people that were just super gifted. And then I started doing it myself. And that led to, these collaborations with Joe Cocker and Etta James, and then producing a lot of regional indie records and things like that. So that's the story. So ever since now, I just do every day is something different, not only musically, but different people, different role for me. There's some artists I work with where if I didn't offer to co-write with them, they'd be insulted. And there's other artists I work with where if I offered to write with them, they'd be insulted. Right. So you kind of have to read the room and know, what does this person want from me? Yeah. And what does this person need from me? Yeah. But it's led to, I've done a lot of writing in Nashville and LA and did that tour with Paul Westerberg playing guitar. That's when I realized I never wanted to be a touring musician. It was 22 hours of stupid and 2 hours of awesome every day. And I don't like those numbers, but it was fun. It was just a 2-month thing. And then I kept on building better studios. I've always been a home studio guy. Sure. And now I've settled in South Minneapolis in the Kill Room. Yeah, working every day on different things, some more glamorous than others. But if you've ever waited tables for a living, this job I have now is the best job in the world. Even if I'm working on a record that not that many people will hear or whatever, it is always super fun. Yeah. Compared to waiting tables and compared to anything. I think it's the best job in the world.
No argument for me.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions about this. So one of those first lucky or fortunate breaks where David Z sees you in the opening act and you get your eyes open to this world of publishing. That was somewhere in the 80s, right? And then
that was very early 90s.
Very early 90s. Okay. So, but there's a few years where this is sort of happening up until the point where you start doing some writing and collaboration with Johnny Lang. that leads to more and more stuff. Are you ever on a publishing deal through these years? Is this all just independent? Like, how is this working for you?
I should have stayed independent the whole time because I have had a bunch of different publishing deals. Some of them were good because they gave me big stinky piles of money, but I've never gotten any of my major cuts or anything like that or film TV things from the efforts of a publisher. So I've never had that kind of relationship with a publisher where they're actually doing what they're supposed to do.
Oh.
I did really like my first big publishing deal was with Lieber and Stoller Music. And that felt great because, I mean, they're Lieber and Stoller. I mean,
Legends.
just hanging out with them was amazing. It's like, hey, so Hound Dog for Elvis. How did that go?
Yeah, I was going to say, give us some examples of Lieber and Stoller for anybody that doesn't know them.
Well, they wrote Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock for Elvis. They wrote
Stand By Me,
Yakety Yak, Stand
right?
By Me, Yakety Yak for the Coasters. And just, if you're listening to oldies radio, you can't listen for an hour without hearing their music.
Yeah.
And that was great because I got to quit my last day job, and that's worth a lot. In retrospect, yeah, they give you money, but then they own 25% of your publishing on the songs that they get from you forever. And so financially, it would be better if I never had done any publishing deals, but it was worth it to quit that day job and become a full-time musician. The day I got my first advance check, I was on cloud nine, obviously, because, you know, this happened to me relatively later in life. I was in my 30s. So it wasn't more like, yay, it was more like, whew. But I went to the bank, and I remember I went to this big bank, suburban bank, and they had this big, huge lobby, and it was beautiful, and the sun was shining in, and there was only one other person in the room, this huge room, except for me. And it was this black guy that was dressed in a $3,000 suit, and he's just like perfect looking. And it was Terry Lewis.
Oh, wow.
I know, who I'd never met before. And I went up to him and I was like, Mr. Lewis, we've never met, but I just wanted to say that's really nice to run into you here today because I just got my first publishing deal and quit my hopefully last day job. And I'm depositing the check here. And it's just kind of wild to run into you because you've done so well with your publishing. And he looked at me and he was so kind. And he said, see, now you're starting to get paid. He goes, and he kind of like whispers in my ear, me? I'm all about getting paid. And I never forgot it. That was a moment. So yeah, I've had a bunch of publishing deals since, but now I own all my own publishing, and I can't imagine ever signing another publishing deal. It's hard if you end up doing, like I'm working on a record right now that I have the feeling has a good chance of being the biggest thing I've worked on since the Johnny Lang days.
That's exciting.
It is, and I'm sure I will get, if I'm right about that, if it does happen the way I hope it does, I'm sure I'll get stupid publishing offers, you know, with stupid money. But I don't think so.
Well, how did you end up, you know, collaborating with Etta James, Joe Cocker? Like, was that through some of these publishing connections, or was that always just on your own stuff?
Always on my own. There was this guy, I didn't even know him, but he had heard some of my songs, I guess. And he called me up and he was like, hi, I'm blah, 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 and I'm producing the next Etta James record, and I'm looking for songs. And so this is back in the FedEx them a CD.
So somebody
days.
just knew your reputation.
Yeah. So I sent him a CD of a bunch of songs, and I didn't hear anything for like a year or whatever. I forgot about it because, you know, most of the time it turns out to be nothing. And then the guy calls me back, and I had forgotten about it. And he says, Kevin, this is blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to remember who he was. He goes, I got someone here who wants to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. This voice comes on the phone. Kevin? Yeah. Kevin Bowe? Yeah. This is Etta James. She goes, did you write these songs? And I said, yeah. And she goes, man, are you a white boy? Remember I said, not anymore. She said, I'll never forget it because she was very funny and very friendly, and she really liked the songs. She recorded 4 of them.
Wow.
She said, then she fired that producer, so that guy didn't even end up producing the record. Welcome to show business. But she said, man, you bringing it all back home just like the Rolling Stones. And my takeaway was that white people are like the Rolling Stones. They are the Rolling Stones. But the way she said it was like the Rolling Stones. And I just thought that was so cool. And we got to be pals. And every time she'd come to town, I got to open for her a couple times. And she played the Guthrie once and like called me out from the audience and stuff. She was super, super funny.
That's awesome.
Very funny person. I miss her.
Okay. The other follow-up question from that story outside of the publishing stuff is once you started getting that seed of, ooh, I'm going to get into the nerdy stuff, as you put it, in the engineering. You said you started producing and you had hired an engineer. Were you working out of existing studios, renting rooms? At what point, like, how did the transition to the Kill Room happen for you?
Well, I did a bunch of records with Dick Shoptoe, and he had a great home studio in Minneapolis. He just did the knobs, and I did the production, and it was great. And I loved working with him. And then I started, I think this is probably a natural progression. I started to get fussier and fussier. Well, can't you make it sound like this? Can't you make it more sound like this? Like that? And I think I started driving him crazy. And I was driving myself crazy too. And on one day I kind of woke up and realized, I was like, if you're going to be this fussy, you need to take responsibility for yourself and learn how to do this. This isn't fair to drive this guy crazy like this and have him, change the mix a million times. And so I got Pro Tools, set it up in my little laundry room I had at the time. I got a couple of Audio-Technica mics and a Avalon one channel mic pre, great mic pre, terrible compressor, and started just figuring it out. And then I learned a lot I started working at IPR teaching.
When was that?
That, I don't even remember. I think it was in the 1930s. It was a long time ago. So then I'm in this building with all these great audio engineers, just soaking it up. And I learned a lot from Steve Hodge, who was the in-house engineer for Flight Time during their whole reign of terror.
Okay.
Amazing engineer. And a kid who worked for him named Colt Lieb.
Yep.
And I got a call from this manager guy who managed the Meat Puppets, one of my favorite punk bands from the 80s. And they had done a record and they needed someone to mix it. And this manager guy wasn't very audio savvy. So he thought of me as a mixer, which I totally wasn't. I was completely unqualified for this job.
Yeah.
But what do you say when someone offers you money to do a job?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that.
I can do that.
You've got the right guy.
Yeah.
So I got off the phone and then I was just terrified. And I called Colt Lieb. I remember I was almost crying. I was like, Colt. And he said, listen, we'll split the gig. You can edit, because he was kind of Steve Hodge's edit guy. And so I was Colt's edit guy, and I got to watch and go through the process of mixing the record with Colt. And I've never needed to hire an engineer since. He was a great teacher. He's a great guy.
That's awesome. Well, I think that, quickly at least brings us up to today. And I want to circle back too to the project that you're excited about. Do you want to talk about that artist a little bit?
I do. One of the things I'm really excited about now, and have been for a while, is an artist from Northern England named Courtney Hadwin. She's 19. And I first heard about her, like a lot of other people, because she was, I don't watch those singing contest shows. I'm way too codependent. I can't stand it when they get up and they're really bad and people are laughing and stuff. I'm not a big fan of humiliation and cruelty. Some people are. That's fine. It's not for me. But she was on America's Got Talent and she was 13. And she sang a version of the Otis Redding song made famous by the Black Crowes, Hard to Handle. Stick thin, chalk white, little shy girl. And when she started singing, I haven't heard anything like that since Johnny Lang, really, who was an amazing singer. And I remember, I don't watch those shows, so I was downstairs in the studio working like I always am. And my wife was in the living room. She happened to see it on TV. And she was like, Kevin, get up here. You got to see this. I'm like, no, I'm busy. Leave me alone. She said, no, you got to see this. And I come up and I go, oh, those singing shows. I hate those things. She goes, shut up and listen. And watching this girl sing, I was like, oh my God. And it made a big impression on me. And then I never heard much about her after that because as it happens, she did get signed by Simon Cowell from the show. And I guess somehow did a 2-year deal with him without releasing any original music, just a couple of covers. And then he folded his company or something. I'm not sure if I have all this right. Then she did another deal for a couple of years with Britney Spears' manager, no original music being released. Now she's, 16 and she's not as shy and she's starting to get a little antsy. You know what I mean? Because the music business does love to do that. They love to sit on artists and not release music. That business philosophy, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not a music business person. I'm really not. But I still think, what did Wayne Gretzky say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And they weren't releasing any any original music on her. And she went totally viral on that thing she did. She had, 10 million views. I mean,
Whoa.
people all around the world knew who she was. And I mean, if you Google, you can still find like, whatever happened to Courtney Hadwin? And I got a call from a woman I knew who was, I think she was working for the Britney Spears manager dude, and she was responsible for Courtney Hadwin. And she hooked me up to write on FaceTime with Courtney because Courtney was so shy that they were having trouble getting songs out of her because she was too shy to co-write with people. But I've gotten pretty good over the years at getting people to open up. And we just bonded right away. I thought she was so funny and so smart and so fun to work with. And we started writing songs, and they didn't release any of them. And then finally she got out of her last deal. And I called her up and I said, dude, don't sign another deal. This clearly isn't working for you. By that point, she was 17, and she was starting to feel pretty feisty about this. I was like, let's do this. We'll both go on DistroKid, and we'll do a punk rock deal. I won't charge you anything. We'll do 50-50 on writing, publishing, everything, master, and we'll just start releasing music independently and see what happens. And stuff started to happen. We put out, 4 songs. One of them has like 1.5 million views on YouTube. She made a couple of cool videos, but we'd still never met. It was all FaceTime. And we wrote a ton of songs that way. Then she got a call about not that long ago, 3 months ago, from Clive Davis to go. They were doing a show at Carnegie Hall, a tribute to Clive Davis and all the artists he signed. Clive is 91. My theory is that Clive never leaves the house unless it's to go to a tribute concert to him. And so he actually gets out a lot because there's a lot of them. And so he's been doing it so long that, a couple of the biggest artists that he signed are no longer with us, primarily Whitney Houston and Janis Joplin. So apparently the people putting the show together had said they were going to get Miley Cyrus to sing a Janis song. And old Clive got wind of it and he said, no, I want Courtney Hadwin, because he was aware of her.
Wow.
And there's not that many people that can sing like Janis Joplin. I mean, physically. They just,
Yeah.
It's
That's
just
rare.
It is very rare. So he called her and asked her to do it. And she said, of course, that's great. So she did Piece of My Heart at Carnegie Hall. And this is just, a couple months ago with the New York Pops. And she got a standing ovation. I mean, Nancy Pelosi and Martha Stewart and all these fancy people were there. And she just killed it. And we're sitting there hanging out all day with Dionne Warwick and Barry Manilow and Carlos Santana and Rob Thomas and John McEnroe, because he's married to the woman who sang Goodbye to You.
Okay.
And it was just surreal. And she killed it. And we worked it out that I met her in New York and I kind of like handled her and got her around and stuff during those 3 days. And then after we flew here to Minneapolis and did vocals on all these songs that we were written and hadn't released for her first album. And I'm finishing that record now. I still have backup singers coming in, gospel singers, in the next few days, and strings. All the horns are done. Almost everything else is done. And we've got like 20 songs.
Awesome.
So I'll finish all of them, mix them. We'll pick which ones go on the record, 10 or whatever. And her first record will come out the first of the year. No publisher, no label, no one telling us what to do, which is nice because neither of us are big fans at this point of hierarchy.
Yeah.
We don't like people telling us what to do. She knows what she wants to do, and I like helping her do it. And we're having a blast with this record. And she came and did vocals for 2 weeks, every day, all day. There's some songs, I looked at one, she did 27 takes of the lead vocal, and that's not at my request. She is really hardworking. Those people in Northern England are different. People like us in the States, we think of England and we think of Bridgerton. We think of posh people in London, right?
Sure.
I always tell Courtney, she lives outside of York. And I always say, you live in the Bemidji of England. They're hard scrabble, working class people. And they're this is just my cultural take, skeptical and distrustful of fancy people saying fancy things. And so I appreciate that. She's very down to earth in her artistic approach and her personal approach. But we just had the best time. And I'm super excited for this record because, she's got social media, it is what it is, but she's got over 1 million subscribers to YouTube. So these people have been waiting for a record from her for 7 years.
Yeah.
And they never gave up on her.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
And they're all over the world. So people will hear, they're waiting for this. And that's exciting.
Well, I'm excited for you guys and excited to hear this whole record when it comes out. So congrats on getting this process happening after so long. And it'll be a fun one to see what happens with it. She's got everything that's, obviously got the talent, has now a producer and recording ability. She's already got a fairly sizable audience from the sounds of it. If she's has the ability to make some videos and stuff, she's got everything she needs.
She's dying to tour, so she's busy putting a band together in UK and talking to managers and trying out different management relationships and stuff like that. But I stay out of that. That's not my thing. But I got a good feeling about this. I mean, I could be wrong. It could all go to hell tomorrow, but the music is definitely there. Because, we wrote for 4 years.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
Well, let's get into the meat of the episode today. Myths and misunderstandings of the music business.
Let's throw lies in there, too.
Sure.
Because some of them aren't misunderstandings. They're actual bald-faced lies.
All right. Yeah, I like that. Do you want to kick it off? I brought a list of things, so I'm happy to structure it however you want. We can talk about anything.
You start. Let's start.
Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about my latest offering for independent artists here at Helvig Productions. As you may know, I'm a music producer located here in the Twin Cities, and I've been running a recording studio for the last 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of local artists spanning pop, rock, Americana, and all the various forms of indie singer-songwriter music. And I know just how hard it can be to finish your own songs. It's easy to get stuck in a death loop of endlessly tweaking things, rewriting sections, or just completely starting over and never feeling satisfied. This is why I've started offering a free song analysis, which I call Musician's Roadblock Relief. If you're currently stuck working on that same song over and over again, I'd love to offer you some ideas that may help. I will objectively analyze your track and offer some helpful possibilities to hopefully get you unstuck and back to finishing that project. My feedback will cover one of the 3 areas where I've seen artists struggle the most. The first one is the song itself. I've had artists come to me wanting to produce a song that just isn't great. But there's no sense in spending money on a bad song because no amount of production or mixing will fix that. You need strong melodies, good lyrics, and a nice flow from start to finish. The second roadblock I see artists run into is bad production. Even if the song is good, the production needs to match the sound you want. Are the sounds right for your style? Is the arrangement too messy? How does it build? Are you doing too much or too little? When all the supporting production elements work in harmony, the song comes to life. And the last thing is mixing problems. Nothing is more frustrating than loving your song, but discovering it sounds terrible everywhere outside of your home studio. Pro-level mixing is hard, and it takes years to master. Mixing problems may be holding you back. If you've wasted enough time in the trial and error loop and are ready to try a different approach, head to helvigproductions.com/fixmysong and fill out my application. That's HELVIG productions.com/fixmysong. I'll take a look at your specific situation, and if I think I can help, I certainly will. It's 100% free and may just be the thing to get you unstuck and back making progress toward your goals.
Myth number 1.
Well, I sort of had, when I started thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I started realizing that there was a lot of points that I wanted to make that were all maybe sub-points of the same overarching point. So let's start with some big ones. And I thought one of the first ones is the music industry is dead. And I thought that's the overarching conversation for a couple individual points that actually came up on the phone between us when we were talking about, which was you can't make any money in the music industry, therefore the music industry is dead. And there's no good music anymore, therefore the music industry is dead.
Yeah.
And so why don't you break that down a little bit for people of why those are just bold-faced lies?
Okay. There's no good music anymore. If you look at it in a historical context, most people, not nerds like us, but most people in the general public, they discover music when they're 12, 13, 14 as a big part of their lives. Then it remains a big part of their lives while they go through high school and college. And then music relatively quickly becomes a much less important part of their lives as marriage, job, kids take over. All of a sudden they don't have time to sit and listen to the new 10 record set by, archived Grateful Dead, recordings. Then those people, for the rest of their lives, they say, I've heard people say this, the golden age of music was 19 blah, blah, blah to 2000 blah, 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 blah. And that happens to be the golden age of music started when they were 14 and ended when they were 24. Okay, well, let's look at that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I mean, look at a lot of my favorite music came out between 1964, let's say, with the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, although I wasn't paying attention when that happened because I was 3, to 1976. That was a big year for me because that's when corporate rock and AOR formatting took over FM radio programming. And so a lot of my favorite stuff happens in between there. But I have favorite music from every decade, from the, 1920s to now. Over the last many years, I've developed an incredible fascination and love with disco. And I didn't pay attention to disco at all when it came out. But they just did. I saw it on public television, this 2-hour documentary on disco, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I think that explains that myth.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to it depends where your attention is at.
Exactly.
If you're putting your attention into something new and trying to understand it, you will find something to appreciate about it. And
absolutely.
It's when you stop trying and when you stop giving things enough time. It comes down to that if you listen to something long enough. So part of being in that age group when you're exploring music, music's on, you're going to parties, you're hanging out with people where you want to like something,
That's the key.
Yeah.
And I would much rather love something than hate something.
Right.
There's very few, I can't think of a single style of music where I go, I hate that and just wipe it out like that. That's a pretty heavy statement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I hate cheese. They're like, wow, there's so many different kinds of cheese. You really hate all of it?
Yeah.
Have you tried all of it? No, you haven't. So people like to say that because they don't have time anymore. They're not willing to put in the time. And I understand that. I'm not saying you should quit hanging out with your young children and spend more time listening to music, but then don't write it off just because you're no longer looking.
Well, it's also, it's the amount of time that you spend looking for stuff and listening and trying to understand. But then there's also like the cultural relevance of things. Because some people are going to go, listen, I've listened to this new band and I just don't like this and this and this. Maybe they're old musicians where they used to, they have an ear for it. They understand why they don't like something, or at least they can articulate it. But some of that comes down to then you have to understand the cultural tide underneath it. So,
absolutely.
So for instance, there's guys that grew up in the heyday of some amazing classic rock music. And then when punk came around, they were like, I don't understand this and I hate it. Because it was a lot of the antithesis of what was going on with like some really intensely musical, classical rock, progressive stuff. And then you had punk going, we're going to play 3 or 4 chords and it's going to be loud and noisy. And we don't care about any of that stuff.
And your parents are going to hate it.
Yeah.
Everything I look for in music.
But that was the point.
And
and you see that all the time of like a new genre coming and saying, we're not going to do any of what you just did there.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool about it. And part of it is understanding and what that cultural relevance is.
Yeah. And taking the time to understand it and standing back with a little humility and not just looking through the lens of your own life, but the bigger picture. There's a corollary to that, I think, too, because, wasn't it Johnny Rotten wore a t-shirt that said Pink Floyd sucks or, kill Pink Floyd or something like that. And when I first got into punk rock, I was ripe for the picking because I was very disillusioned with later 70s rock, Journey and bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and things like that. I felt like very left out and excluded, like, you'll never be able to play like this. And my favorite thing about music and art in general is, hey, you can do this. Come on, come with us. And so when the Ramones came out, you could buy a guitar and in about 3 months, you could kind of do it. You can't do it like they did, but you could kind of do it. And I love that. That's like really the whole thing of folk music. Get a guitar, join our circle. And I love that feeling of, being included. And I don't like that feeling of being excluded. That's what got me into music in the first place, is being excluded from like, hey, you suck at sports. We're going to pick you last for the team. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to go buy a guitar. But then the corollary to this is that Pink Floyd doesn't suck.
Right.
And with time comes this, because I remember there was things I loved, like, I don't know, Jeff Beck or whatever. And then when punk came around, I like put all those records away.
Yeah.
And then years later, not that long after, I was like, you know what? No, I actually like it all.
Yeah.
And there's horrible punk rock music and there's horrible progressive rock music. Like, perfect example is the band Yes.
Sure.
I spent years like, I don't think I like Yes anymore because I love the Ramones and the Clash and the Damned. And then it wasn't that long, I don't know, maybe a few years ago, I heard something by Yes and I was like, and I saw them with the, the classic lineup and stuff like that.
Cool.
And it's like, I don't care what anyone thinks. I love Yes. I said to Dan Wilson once, I was like, well, Yes is a guilty pleasure for me. And he quickly looked at me and said, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. I disagree. I think there are things. But like, I love ABBA. I love disco. I love Yes. I don't care.
I just appreciate people doing something really, really well. And I think there's two ways to look at that. There's like from the musical technical standpoint of like, wow, that's just a really well-written song, or wow, those instrumental performances are incredible, or wow, that production's incredible. All of those like technical sort of judgments. Yeah. I can have appreciation for that. But then I think, and this is where I think more people struggle, is then also going, but I can also appreciate the influence that this is having and the emotional chord that this is striking. And
you can find something to love if you listen with an open mind.
Yes.
Usually.
I think more recently you can think of like SoundCloud rap kind of stuff and like people, mumble rap and stuff like that. And it's like, again, another genre, people just go, I don't understand it. I hate it,
Those are two separate things. I don't understand. And then I hate. It reminds me of the origin of the word barbarian. I'm not sure if I have this exactly right. I'm sure I'll get many emails if I screwed up. But the English, when they were out colonizing the world, they were invading, taking over some country, and they couldn't understand what the indigenous people were saying. And it sounded to the English like they were just saying bar, 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 even though they were speaking just in a different language. And so the British thought it was just nonsense. It didn't mean anything because they didn't understand it. And that's where the word barbarian came from. And I think that happens in music and art and people too. I don't understand it, therefore I hate it. As opposed to, I don't understand it, I want to try to understand it.
Exactly, because it's whenever I come across something where I'm like, right away, like, what is this? And maybe to my ear, I'm like, this doesn't strike me as being good right away. But the first question I ask myself is, but people do, obviously. So what are they hearing?
And the people who love it, why do they love
Exactly.
it? That's the most important question as a record producer about any new project. And it sounds kind of crass, but it's like, what are we selling here with this thing? Like if it's Americana music, then it better be the songs and the vocal, because that kind of music can't get by, sonic surprises and pretense. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's not Americana.
Right.
I'm generalizing, but you get the idea. But like listening to John Coltrane for the first time, that can be really scary for people, or certain Miles Davis records. They want him to continue to, Kind of Blue, Volume 2. And it's like, no, he's going to do Bitches Brew. And you got to get in there and dig and just live with it for a second.
Time
Time
teaches you something. If you give it and you keep an open mind and you try to understand why.
I think another thing, speaking of time, is that when you're young, and this isn't true of all people, but it was definitely true of me. When I was 14, I was small for my age and bad at sports and blah, blah, blah. So I liked music that made me feel big. My first favorite band was The Who, because I looked at Pete Townsend and I was like, well, he's not handsome and he's up there doing it. And so maybe there's hope for me. But I liked, like Led Zeppelin and The Who and this stuff that like made me feel powerful in a world where I didn't feel powerful. So at that age, maybe not for everybody, but for a lot of people, your music that you like is kind of an advertisement for yourself or the person you wish you were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a lot of super white bread suburban kids loved gangster rap.
Yeah.
Because they felt like, yeah, I'm not just a boring white suburban kid. I'm like, this or want to be seen like this.
I think that, but also it's funny that you say that because I had a client in that I've worked with for a long time, this last weekend. And I don't remember how it came up, but he was saying that like in his childhood, he listened to gangster rap and that's what he was into. He does nothing like that now. But what really attracted to him, he, had a tough upbringing And he just said, like, just the confidence and that, like, you can say that?
Yeah.
You can say that to somebody?
Like freedom.
Yeah, freedom. It represented freedom and an alter ego and an escape. And I think, much to your point of that, it made you feel bigger. You got to escape what was holding you back or holding you down or any of those things. And music in a lot of different forms can do that for people.
That's why by the late 70s, when music got to be so technical, and I always use Journey as an example because to me, and not to knock Journey, I'm just saying it didn't speak to me because it felt like they were up on this pedestal, like, you know, you'll never be able to play guitar like this. And I was at the time like, you're right, I never will. On the other hand, Ramones. But now that I'm older, the music that I like is only determined by first songwriting above all else. Not only songwriting, but first songwriting. And that could mean, that's a broad definition. That doesn't mean lyrics. I love Booker T and the MGs and a lot of instrumental music, Medeski, Martin, and Wood, that don't have any lyrics at all. Second, vocals, if there are vocals. And then third, everything else. So I listen to music in a very different way now than I did when I was a kid. Very different way. And I'm usually able to find something I love. Couple of things, new metal is tough for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not that you're going to love everything. You're not. It's just more...
Or do everything.
Yeah.
I could never do that. Nobody's going to hire me to do a hip-hop record, unless it was like some 80s or 90s throwback hip-hop record. But yeah, nobody's ever going to hire me to do a new metal record, and I'm not interested in it. I probably don't understand it, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, exactly. It's more about just, you know, but if you set out to, you probably could.
Yeah.
You know, if you wanted...
If I had to get it to get money for food...
Yeah.
New metal. Absolutely. I would figure it out.
Right.
And during that process, I probably...
Would appreciate it a lot more.
Would appreciate it, yeah. Right now, I just look at... I listen to that and I'm like, I just want to give that guy a hug. So angry.
You know, a part of what draws us to music is if we think it represents cool to us at that time. And so I've also heard conversations of like, for instance, today, there's a lot of popular music that sounds like music from the 80s, right? That's a huge thing. And conversations of like, yeah, but now it's better, you know? Now it's better versions of what the 80s was trying to do, but they failed at. And it's like, well, they didn't fail at it. That's what...
They sold a lot of records.
That's what was cool. Those choices, exactly how they did it, was what made it cool in the 80s. Cool's just different today. And now how people are doing it today is the cool version of that. Cool changes.
That's an excellent point. Yes, cool changes. And it's funny, the influence that's had on me, because I've noticed that starting, I mean, when did those 80s like DX7 sounds start to come back? 10 years ago or whatever, maybe even more. And all of a sudden the 80s is cool again. And in the 80s, I still was super opinionated about music and like, you know, the only good band is the Replacements and blah, 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 all this kind of crap. And I ignored a lot of the popular music in the 80s and now I started hearing those synth sounds and 80s production techniques on newer indie rock records, and sometimes it's tongue-in-cheek, and sometimes it's a adoring wink, you know, and sometimes it's just straight up, I love this, you know, and I'm like, it's made me go back to some 80s music and realize that I love it, you know what I mean? Vangelis, what a genius. Without Vangelis, there's none of that amazing soundtrack for Stranger Things, you know what I mean? And so it's really made me go back and re-examine a lot of that 80s music and find a lot of things to love.
Yeah. All right, we can't spend our whole conversation on our first point about
another myth.
Yeah. Can't make any money.
That reminds me of old guys sitting around going, I miss tape. Seriously? I can't think of a more boring conversation. All I know is, how do I say this without sounding like a D-bag? I make what I consider to be great money doing this. Now, what I consider to be great money might not be the same thing as some other people, but there is money to be made. It's just different, and maybe you might have to work harder for it. But some people are. Some people are.
It's just changed. You know?
It's changed a lot. It used to be you were looking for a pot of gold, and now you're out, you're in this big field, and you're looking for that, get a hit, pot of gold. Now you're out in the field, and you're looking for little single pieces of gold. But there's still gold out there.
Yeah, yeah. I also just think that, you know, it's how people make money. The traditional model has very much changed. I don't think there's anybody arguing that point anymore, and there's a lot of people that still lament it. But it's also that music is more popular than ever. it continues to grow in popularity, and we have a supply and demand issue. There's so much music and so many choices that what's happening is there's a feeling of being anonymous as another artist putting out music, because, you know, the upside is it's very, very accessible, and now we have a lot of people making music. The downside is we have a lot of people making music. So you have to do a lot more work to differentiate yourself and to stand out and to find your audience, to find your way. And this is on all sides of the industry, whether you're public facing and you're a performer, you're a writer, whatever, or if you're in the studio like us doing things like,
absolutely.
It takes a lot of work, but it certainly can happen. And in some ways there's more opportunity. It's just going to be difficult to...
I think it's the difference. When the major labels were running the whole show, I felt like everyone was chasing that big break. And I don't really like chasing, and I'm not very good at it, but I really do like building. And now I think it's about building. My least favorite thing in life is sitting around waiting for someone to do something for me that they promised to do for me. A label, a publisher, a manager. I like doing it myself because I've never had, or very, very, very few and rare experiences where somebody else came along and actually did what they said they were going to do, a music business entity. But the flip side of that, I'm not, am I going to sit around and be all pissed off about that for the rest of my life? No, I figured out how to do it myself, and there's not a better feeling.
Yeah.
And if without, in the old days before the internet, you could not do it yourself, or it was way, way harder. You couldn't, if you're going to have a studio in your house, you'd have to have a 24-track tape machine and know how to fix it and calibrate it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So anyone who says, I miss tape, it's like I love people doing that where they never worked with tape. Do you remember carrying, well, I don't know how old you are. Do you remember carrying around tape?
Yeah.
It was really heavy. And one reel would sound totally different than the other reel. And it was, I don't miss tape at all. I do miss sometimes musicians. The difference that tape makes for me is not the sound. I don't miss the sound. I can get exactly the sound I want with Pro Tools. It's back in the tape days, the band would show up for their session and they'd be really well rehearsed because it was expensive.
Yes.
And they'd have their guitars just been set up at the store, intonated. Their amps were, biased and new tubes, and the drummer had new heads, and it was like an audition. And they'd give you 4 takes, and they'd look at you through the glass and go, "Did we get it?" Now, most of the band shows up. Bobby can't make it because he's delivering pizzas this night, and blah, blah, we'll throw him in later, blah, blah, blah. And they kind of know the songs, and they give you 20 takes. And instead of looking at you through the glass and go, "Did we get it?" They look at you and go, "You got enough?"
Yeah.
That's an acrobat who's never worked without a net. They know they can fall and they're not going to die, as opposed to an acrobat who's worked without a net where it's like, yeah, you can fall, but you'll probably die.
Yeah.
And I don't think about that often, but sometimes I do, because there's a certain vitality and energy that you used to get that might be harder to get. But we can still do that now. We just might have to impose that constraint on the band instead of having tape do it for us.
Sure.
So, but yeah, the thing of there's no money in the music business lately, I can tell you many, many people who, like me, they're too busy working to even think about that. It's just silly.
Your point about whether or not you're waiting around for somebody to give you something or to do something for you versus building it, I think actually leads into kind of one of my other points that I wanted to bring up, which is the broad category I kind of put as, I just need ... And then there's a number of things you hear. I just need a booking agent, and then I'm set.
I hear that all the time.
I just need a manager, and then I'm set. I just need enough people to hear my brilliance, and then I'll be discovered. I just need a label to take care of the business stuff for me because I don't want to learn how to do that. It's I just need something. And that mindset is a myth.
Now it is.
Yes.
Doesn't work that way anymore.
It doesn't work that way.
The funny thing is people, I need a booking agent. No, what you need is a gig. And what you actually need more than a gig is a following. You know what I mean? Because the booking agent, that's like saying, I need a car, to get 5 blocks down the road. It's like, well, no, you need to walk. That's not the best metaphor in the world, but you get where I'm going.
I think I just need to get specific about my goals. I really think that that's what it comes down to is, well, what are you trying to do? And what is your next realistic step Because a lot of that is, you could just substitute as, I just want somebody else to figure this out for me.
And that used to be a thing, but that is no longer a thing. That's definitely, if you're one of those people, and I've done records like this for people, and then when it's done, they're like, yeah, I'm not really good at promotion. It's like, well, this career is not for you then. And maybe that's fair, maybe that's not fair. But, some of these people, it's like, well, if you're sitting there telling yourself constantly, I'm not good at promotion. Well, of course you're not, because that's the message you're telling yourself. You have to do that stuff now because nobody's going to do it for you. Why would somebody else do it for you? There's no money in it. Why would someone be your booking agent when nobody goes to see your band play? That's like saying, if I could just get someone to work for free, and it's just like, well, you probably can, and they're probably worth every penny. Or,
right. Well, a lot of people, I just need a label or whatever. It's like, well, realize that labels are really only going to sign people that are already very hardworking and have success going on for themselves.
And in my experience, they're going to screw it up for them a large percentage of the time. Yeah. I don't say that as an insult to labels. Labels have a really hard job now that music is kind of free. Who would want to be in that business? Sweet mother of God, it's so hard. But most of the artists I've worked with that are on labels in the last few years are very unhappy with their labels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not saying all the indie artists are happy, but at least then if you know who to blame. If you're independent and you're not happy, at least you can look in the mirror and go, you need to do a better job.
Right.
You're fired.
Another one is, I just need a hit. I just need that one hit. But you can see examples of people getting hits or going viral for a moment. It's hard to sustain.
And then what?
You still have to learn all of these hard things of how do you turn that attention to actual real followers, real fans that want to support you and follow along, It's tough because, you look ahead at all these things you need to do, right? And the big journey ahead of you. And I get how people want to just sort of set a milestone of like, okay, if I can get to this point, then things are going to get good. But all that does is you just recalibrate, and now you have a new area, a new target.
That's America. That's like me with drugs. It's like, well, if I just tried this, then I'd be good. It's like, well, no, because if it's good, you're going to want to do it, until you're collapsed in a pile of your own puke, by the side of your car. I think there's another point even deeper and maybe darker. I'm sure this is going to be unpopular, but I'll try and state it as clearly as I can. Back when I was teaching, I used to ask this question of my students every quarter. And the question was, if you have all the people in this country that are trying to make a living doing music as an artist, let's talk about artists. What do you think the most common reason is that they're not able to build a career to the point where they're surviving on, without a day job? And we go around the room, and one kid would be like, drugs. Another kid would be like, bad management. Another person would be lazy. And giving all these reasons. And the one thing I almost never heard was, they're not good enough. Now that sounds like a cruel truth, and it shouldn't. We are still, apparently at this point in our country, a democracy, which means one person gets one vote. Not super smart people, their vote is worth 5. And a super dumb person, their vote is worth a half. Everyone gets one vote. But that is not true in sports. You don't get to go to the Olympics just because, hey, everyone deserves a shot. Now, my generation is the one that screwed this up, because my generation was the first one in grade school where it's just like, hey, if you can dream it, you can do it. Everyone gets a ribbon just for showing up. That's how I was raised. And it gave me a sense of false entitlement, that I have had beat out of me since, but I held on to it for a long time. Life is not like that. Some people are just better than others. If you are on a street corner busking and nobody stops, then, okay, let's imagine you have a 21-year-old Jimi Hendrix and put him on a street corner. Everyone's going to stop. You know why? Because he's better. And that is a part of this. You don't deserve you're not entitled to a career in music just because you have the desire. Desire is not the same thing as talent. You can increase your talent with hard work, which some people are willing to do and some people aren't willing to do. But this idea of like, I deserve a career in music. Nobody, myself included, deserves a career in music. I get up every day in my studio working at 7 o'clock in the morning, not because I'm like a hard worker, because I love it. It's not work. There's nothing else I want to do. And I just think that's an important thing to remember, that it's not one of those things where if you can dream it, you can do it. There's so much product sold in this country. If you turn on the TV, follow your dreams. Go ahead. That's great. Follow your dreams, but you don't deserve your dream.
Mhm.
That's why it's called a dream,
Yeah.
instead of an entitlement. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean that, like, look at yourself as an artist realistically. You know what I mean? And compare yourself to the people who are doing what you want to be doing successfully, and ask yourself, am I as good as them?
Mhm.
Because we're not all the same. Thank God.
Yeah.
So there is that. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle.
I agree. I think talent comes first. You have to have a certain level of it and a pretty high level of it if you're going to get where you want to go. But that being said, another conversation I've had with artists coming in that might ask, like, you think this is pretty good? And it's like, let me frame this up. I've been recording local artists for 15 years. If I pull up, let's say, 5 to 10 of the tracks or artists, and I'm like, these are really good, right? And showed them to you. And you did the same for me. And then we went to the other, 30 to 50 producers and studios in town, and they all pulled up great stuff. We'd all be like, these are really very good. They probably, all of those people are probably at a talent level where they could compete, but nobody's heard of them. Or at least the majority of them, nobody's heard of them. And that's one city in one state in one
Right.
country. Talent is important. It's huge. Don't undervalue that. But there's a lot of it out there.
Yeah.
There's a ton of it out there. And, Courtney Hadwin, undeniable talent. But there's been other people on plenty of other singing shows that can sing amazing in different ways and still disappear off the map. It takes more than that.
Persistence, hustle,
Yeah,
a little bit of luck.
talent gets you into the party. It's like the dress code. You have to be dressed like at a certain level
Yeah.
of nice. Now you're allowed in.
Talent is an at bat, not a home run.
Yeah.
The other flip side of that, though, is a lot of the people I do records for, and I'm guessing you probably run into this too, they only want to make a record for the joy of making a record.
Yeah. That's a whole different thing.
That's a whole different thing. And I enjoy making those records. I make a lot of those kinds of
I
records.
make a lot of them.
Yeah. And they're fun. And those people, they're kind of relaxed. And they're super happy because people like you and me, if we're doing our job right, can make them sound better than they ever would have dreamed.
Yeah.
By surrounding them with great session musicians, or, mixing things that we do, or just coaching them, and helping them. And that's our job. And there's a joy in that. And sometimes I feel like the changes in the music business are kind of cool in that way, because I don't see a lot of people getting into the music business now because they're like, I'm going to be rich.
Yeah.
What kind of idiot? You know what I mean?
So many easier ways to make money.
Oh, come on. Yeah. And then the other thing to think about is, like, I feel like I'm rich because, like, how much money do I need? What do I want that I don't have? You know what I mean? I drive a 2007 Honda CRV. It never bothers me.
Mhm.
I don't care about cars. All I care about is my world is very focused. You know what I mean? I hang out with my family. I do music. That's it. Watch a lot of Netflix. That's it. Go to a lot of movies. But I'm not like a big vacation guy. My kids are grown and out of the house. Time is much more important to me than money. If I spend all day doing music, that was all I ever wanted. And I have that now. I've had it for a long time, and it makes me super happy. I get up every day and I can't believe how lucky I am, because I never work.
Well, you enjoy the process.
Totally.
And I do think that that's another kind of myth or misunderstanding, because I will have some people, send demos in or, think about doing a record. And every now and then there'll be people that'll ask, like, well, do you think it's there? Do you think it's good enough that people are going to care like this? Basically, will the end justify these means? Will my sacrifices or my payment or whatever I'm doing, like, in the end, will people like this enough to make this all worth it? And first of all, I can never answer that question. How could I? But I think it's a little bit misguided in that if you're sort of making those calculations in your head of like, well, if I just play enough shows, if I get enough of these things, then eventually this is going to pay off. I think you're looking at it slightly wrong. You have to like the process itself.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Do you like playing those shows? If the answer is no.
And the question is, will you like this enough to make it worth it? Not will they
exactly right.
like it enough to make it worth it.
And that's usually how I end up reframing it of like, just pretend that no one will ever listen to this. That shouldn't be part of the calculation. Because honestly, if we're going to account for some basic rounding of the global population, nobody probably will hear this.
Yeah, right.
Really.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the number is still going to be, you got 1,000 streams, you get 10,000 streams, even if you get 1,000,000 streams, that's still generally nothing in the global scheme of things.
But the first question is the one stream. Are we going to be able to do something so that you, Mr. or Mrs. Artist, when you listen to it, it gives you undefinable joy.
Right.
Of like, I can't believe this is me.
Right.
That's my job. I view what we do, and this, I don't know how other people feel about this. I don't know if I've talked about it with other producers. It's a service position. When I'm working with an artist, that artist isn't the most important person in the room. That artist is the only person in the room. I'm not checking my texts. I'm not checking my socials. I'm not looking at this. I'm not looking at that. My phone is turned over away. Plus, sometimes it makes that noise in the monitors, which doesn't go to tape, but it still bothers me. And my entire focus is on that artist. They love that.
Yeah.
And they deserve it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They deserve your full attention.
Yeah.
It is. It's that question. Will you enjoy making this? Will you enjoy doing that gig? Will you enjoy the growth, the challenge, et cetera, et cetera?
Everything about it.
If not, then no, probably the end will not justify those means.
Yeah. I don't expect other people to be as insane as me. I mean, I do all my own editing. You know what one of my favorite things to do is? You're going to laugh. I love editing drums. Now, a lot of people who've gotten to, whatever level, they have someone who edits their drums for them. And number one, I have trust issues.
Sure.
Number two, I like it done exactly the way I like it done. But number three, I love editing drums. Sometimes editing vocals gets a little old, but I don't hate doing that either. I love all of it. I just love it that I'm doing something different every day. But what was your next myth? Because it's fun. Blowing them up.
I have a couple more. This kind of gets into maybe specifically on the recording side of things, but I think this could actually go for even the business side of stuff too, which is, well, my favorite artist / influencer did it that way, so that's the way it should be done.
There is no way that it should be done. There's stuff you love and there's stuff you don't love, or stuff that hits you and stuff that doesn't hit you. I'm saying individuality is more important than quality. I know plenty of super rich dudes that build unbelievable studios full of incredible gear, and no music ever comes out of those studios that makes me feel anything. All right? And then I know plenty of people that have unbelievably sucky studios that make records that mean something to me, a lot to me for, most of my life. Now, that doesn't mean I want to have sucky gear. I'm saying that the most important thing is to have a point of view so that when someone hears it, they go, they feel your intent. You know what I mean? That's more important than, I could be great if I just had this microphone or this compressor or this plug-in. John Fields has a great quote. This reminded me of this. Someone is online hassling John about plugins. Everyone has too many plugins and all these new plugins and blah, but plugins are stupid. And John, he has a way of really getting to the point that I really appreciate. He wrote, I like plugins because they inspire me. And I went, there it is. It's not about the plugin. It's like it made you do something musically or think of something that you wouldn't have thought of before. And I've worked with John a ton, and it's true. I've seen him get a new plugin and be inspired and do something amazing with joy in it and individuality. But it's not the plugin. It's John. And so, I think the hang up of, I could be great if I could just get into, have a studio like this or whatever. It's like, that's not bad.
And similarly, it's not the process, it's who did it.
And why they
did it. And all the factors that go into that, a classic thing of I've had people come in, all right, the band's going to record and we're going to do an album in a day. We're going to do 10 songs live because the Beatles did that on their first record or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but you're not the Beatles.
The Beatles didn't do that record in one day. They did it over the years that they played in Hamburg.
Exactly.
For how many hours a day did they play? 8 hours?
Yeah, it was an insane amount of shows leading up to that. Yeah.
It's Malcolm Gladwell. It's pure Malcolm Gladwell, the 10,000 hours thing. You know what I mean? They did that record after doing that. What did you do?
And the opposite side of that is, well, Billie Eilish did it in her bedroom, and so I'm going to do it in my bedroom and I'll figure it out. And it's like, well, But Billie Eilish is Billie Eilish and has Phineas as a brother.
And has Phineas as a brother, exactly.
And, you might not be there.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you should hire somebody to help you. It goes on both ways. But the point is, it's not that one process is the way to go.
No.
It just depends. Just because somebody else did it that way doesn't mean it's right for you. I
don't think Picasso was great because he used this kind of brush. Right. That said, I have a lot of fun, not as much fun as I used to, but still a lot of fun nerding out with different gear and stuff like that. I've got pretty much this. It's less often now because I have a bunch of stuff that I hear about something, especially hardware, where I go, oh my God, I have to have that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But still plugins, and I still pay attention to that stuff and subscribe to Tape Op and read the magazines, and because I want to know. It's just this innate curiosity that makes me very happy. It's like with music documentaries. I am not now, nor have I ever been a huge Bon Jovi guy. I just never paid that much attention to them. When they were huge in the 80s, I was like just, replacements, blah, 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 whatever. But they just did this 4-hour documentary, 4-hour documentary. Did you hear about this on Bon Jovi? And I watched it, and it was amazing. I'm still not going to go out and listen to a bunch of Bon Jovi, but the understanding. And it was a really well done documentary. I'll watch a documentary on mice. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If it's well done. I don't really care about the topic as much. I watched that 4-hour bloated self-congratulatory documentary that the Eagles did. And I've never been a big Eagles guy, but I enjoyed it. Partly because they showed Glyn Johns in there talking about recording the Eagles. And that was super cool. But yeah, I read books. You know what I mean? I read Tom Jones' autobiography. You know what I mean? I actually do kind of like him. Some of his stuff I really like. But I read Ace Frehley's autobiography. Never been a huge Kiss guy. There's some songs I really like. Sure. But I just love this. I love this thing that we do.
Staying curious and learning.
About this. Yeah, always. Any aspect of it. So.
I have 2 more myths I want to dig into, and then we should probably wrap this thing up before it gets overly long. Playing covers is just selling out.
The reason I never played in a cover band is because I'm the kind of person where it's easier for me to write my own song than it is to learn a cover and remember how to play it. I'm also the kind of person where I would always go, oh, but if we did it like this, that would be cool, and reinterpret it. And people don't want that. They want it to be these tribute acts. The most successful tribute acts are the ones that recreate the sound exactly. So that's not something that I'm interested in, but my feeling is, especially the way things are right now, if you're a musician and you do something on any given day or night and you're getting paid, I'm like, you go.
Yeah.
You're my hero.
The fact of the matter is covers can be a great way to attract new people to what you're doing. Whether it's an exact replica of just showing, hey, look at how I can recreate this, or if it is a reinvention of or a reinterpretation of something.
And if you don't like covers, great, then don't listen to them. Why would I bother wasting time passing some big judgment? Like, anyone cares what I think or you think anyway. Nobody cares what we think. If you don't like covers, don't listen to them. But I like a lot of covers. I think I would never go see a tribute band because I'm the kind of person where it's like, if I was in a Tom Petty mood, I'd flip on the YouTube and watch Tom Petty videos or that great documentary about Tom Petty. It's a couple of great ones. But the musicians, and a lot of them are good friends of mine that I use as session musicians in my studio, are out playing in a Carpenters tribute or whatever it is. I'm like, good for you. People are paying to go see you play.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually will have a future episode coming up. This was on my mind because I did a pre-interview call for another future guest that is using that technique where he does like tribute or themed shows, and then that's all very much, he does blues rock, so it's all blues rock stuff, and then he throws his originals into that mix, and it's been a really great system for him to find the people that want that kind of music, and then they end up liking his stuff. And that's just one example of how covers can work for you, but there's countless examples of people blowing up on YouTube
from covers. I love, like on the Courtney Hadwin record, if we didn't do one Janis covered, her fans would hunt me down and assassinate me. So we're doing Move Over. And that's what Isaac Levy, who did this podcast as well, and his running buddy Bennett, they played bass and drums on this in incredibly well. I totally enjoy doing that. I prefer myself reinterpretive covers rather than straight up covers. But the whole point is, who cares?
Yeah, agreed.
You know what I mean?
Agreed.
If you don't want to watch a cover band, don't watch a cover band.
If you enjoy it,
Yeah.
and it works for you, then it is
These
good.
people are making money and they're not out there selling fentanyl. They're playing covers.
Right.
So what? Nobody's going to, oh my God, they played a cover. I'm ODing. I'm going to die right in this bar. I mean,
They're
God.
not musicians.
Oh,
Yeah.
Those kind of judgments are just,
Yeah.
you know what you never hear from people who are actually successful in the business? Sentences that start with, I hate.
Yeah.
You never hear even like a big country star, they don't go, I hate rap.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't use the word ignorant, but it kind of is the textbook definition of ignorant, of like, you don't know anything about it, you don't listen to it. But I don't hear people who are actually in the business, working professionals, wiping out entire things, making those big judgments like that.
Well, I do think that sometimes it comes from, a struggling artist that then goes and sees the cover band playing and going like, why are people liking this when they, I've been putting so much time into my art. And this actually is a great segue into what I would be my last point, unless you have any more myths or misunderstandings you want to get to, which is that it's a zero-sum game. I think that this idea of like, if you're doing well, I can't.
Oh,
Yeah. And I think that the
yeah.
cover thing is tied to that of, you're getting all the good gigs because you're just doing these lousy tribute shows or cover shows. And so it's takes away from what I'm trying to do.
Like it's a finite pie.
Exactly, the zero sum.
Well, all I have to say to that is there's that great, I'm sure you've heard it, Paul Wellstone quote, when we all do better,
we all do
better. It's not finite.
Yeah.
It's not finite.
I think there's a temptation to feel that way, though, when you see people get a big gig, a festival slot, another studio gets that client you're after, you name it, where it just feels like it can be a zero-sum game, but I think that's very misunderstood.
I have a little mantra that I've been using in my own mind for years, and that is to the people, myself included, who've ever spent time thinking about what they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of us are lucky we don't get what we deserve. Because think about all the horrible stuff you've done in your life that you never got caught doing. Do you think people are ever like, God, I deserve to pay a debt for that? You know what I mean? No, you just move on and go, whoo, I got away with it. But everyone's so concerned with like this, that they deserve, you're going to get a bunch of stuff in this career that you don't deserve that you get anyway. I've gotten gigs I don't deserve. Hey, my girlfriend owned a nightclub, so I got a bunch of opening gigs. You know what I mean? And then I met David Z. Goody for me, and then, other gigs that I felt I was qualified for and deserved, I didn't get. You know what I mean? So if you just get up and try to hit the ball every day, it will all come out in the wash. And be kind. Be someone where when you walk in the room, people are happy to see you and that the room becomes a better place just because you walked into it. You know what I mean? Because maybe you're able to put others ahead of yourself, which I think, like I was saying before and describing this job, that's essential. You know what I mean? The one thing I say to artists when we're starting a record is one thing I will promise you, this is going to be the most fun you've ever had in your life. And I say it with absolute confidence, and I'm always right. This will be the most fun you've ever had in your life because I'm going to make this so fun for you because I'm really good at what I do. I've done it for a long time, and you come first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Be a diva. I want you to be a diva.
Absolutely.
If you need the lights turned down, if you need incense burning, if you need whatever you need to get in the vibe, let's do that.
I love that. And I try to do the exact same thing of if the littlest thing is bothering you, you should say something. There's no request too big or too small. This is about you. This is about making things.
But I will not buy cocaine for you.
Okay,
that's
there
the
are
one
some
request.
yeah.
It's too expensive. I don't have any moral problem with it. It's just too expensive. These cocaine prices have gotten out of hand. Biden's got to do something.
Well, on that note, we should wrap up. Thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed hanging out with you. One question that I've been ending all of these interviews with is, as you've reflected back on your history, this conversation specifically maybe, or anything else, what is a secret from your time in our scene that you'd want to pass along to other people? It could be to your younger self. It could just be something that came to mind today, whatever. But what's your secret to the scene?
I think there's a short list of things you can do. Oh, God, I'm going to sound like my dad. Work harder. It's simple. Work harder than everybody else. Don't ever be late because it lets people know that you don't value them. Be kind. Help people whenever you can. the way to get what you want in music is by figuring out how to give other people what they want. If you're only thinking about what you want, ironically, it takes a while to get this and it sounds stupid, but I swear it's true. If you're only thinking about what you want, you're not going to get what you want. If you figure out how to be the guy, the person that figures out what other people want and or need without them even needing to tell you, and figure out a way to get it for them, make it happen for them, you'll get everything you want. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does. I think a lot of times when you set out to make something, you should start by asking yourself, what's in it for them?
Yeah, a rare thing.
Yeah. And if you can't answer that, you probably won't get much attention on whatever you're making, whether that's a piece of content, whether that's your next song, if it's a video, whatever. What's in it for them?
Boom.
Well, if people want to reach out and connect with you, maybe talk to you about doing a record or just follow you online, where would you like to send people?
Google my name. There's so many ways. I'm not hard to find.
Sure.
KevinBowe.com.
And Bowe is Bowe.
It is.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll put some contact info for you in our show notes as well.
Oh, thanks.
But for everybody that listened, thank you so much for tuning in. You know, if this was your first time, I hope you enjoyed it. Please tell some more people. And if you've been a continuous listener, thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. Please leave maybe a review or make sure you subscribe on YouTube, that sort of thing. It all goes to keeping this thing going. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.